What's up, everybody? We're here to discuss a couple post-trial interesting things that have happened in Sarah Boone's case. First off is going to be a statement by the victim's family, by George Torres' family, that actually happened during the trial. And I didn't want to talk about it during the trial because I thought it may actually be part of the rebuttal case. And I didn't want to talk about the interview if it was going to come out in evidence, but it did. So now I think it's kind of relevant to discuss. And then also, we get an interview with James Owens where he discusses his thoughts on the plea offer, Sarah Boone's reactions, and what work he is going to do on the case versus work she's going to have to get a different lawyer to do on the case, and how that works with clients switching lawyers in the post-conviction process. It's not always easy, especially for somebody that's had lawyer issues in the past. So we're going to get to all that and more today. And of course, answer your questions. Hit the like button, subscribe to the page. Let's get into it. All right. So the first video we're going to queue up is of George Torres' family, who came out and made these statements during the trial, talking about how the relationship really was. And it was interesting because we had already heard a bunch of conversation about Sarah Boone from the jump. His family is so scary. They want to hurt me. I need protection. So that was kind of my mindset going into it. It's like, oh, what is this family like? And then you hear from the family. I mean, obviously, maybe there are some men in the family she says she was scared of or whatever, but couldn't seem less threatening from this conversation. Not that they'd let that out on court TV, but it's a very different picture than Sarah Boone painted, number one. Number two, they had some very, very interesting things to say that I thought potentially could have been relevant in the rebuttal case. It also seems like they don't feel like they were discussed enough or taken into account enough as the trial process wore on. All right, hold on. I'm getting some people in the chat saying bad connection, so I'm going to check with Kelsey. Checking with her, make sure it's all good. Let me know in the chat if the connection's good, if you can hear me, if you can see me. Okay, all good. We got the all good. So we're going to continue going ahead. So let's take a listen to this and discuss how this evidence could have been potentially relevant and why maybe it didn't come in and why maybe the state attorney's office didn't use it. And it's really interesting to listen to in hindsight, which we're going to do together now.
We are hearing from two very special voices for the victim in the suitcase murder trial for George Torres. Prosecutors say that he was murdered by his longtime girlfriend, Sarah Boone, who had him trapped inside of a suitcase, beat him, and left him to die. The defense is saying that Sarah Boone was acting in self-defense. Now, George Torres' family is speaking out this morning, saying that he's being unfairly depicted as an abuser and that it was Sarah Boone who was the real aggressor. Now, since early in this case, we've seen evidence of Boone's problems with Torres' family.
To know what we're here, what we're investigating, and that they're going to think I killed him.
Why would they think that?
They always have said that. They've always have said that.
What have they
I
said?
told you, it's because I'm the blue-eyed white dragon, that's what they call me, because they don't want him with me. So he's basically just not really been around his family because he chooses me over them.
I want to welcome in our special guests now. We have George Torres' oldest daughter, Ana Victoria Torres, with us. We also have Dolores Ortiz with us, who is George Torres' first wife, and she also brought with her this morning her youngest daughter, Destiny. First of all, my heart goes out to all of you, and for all of us here at Court TV, we are so sorry for your loss. Thank you for coming on the show. And I know that you really want to clear the air. And Ana Victoria, I know you've wanted to kind of be the family spokesperson. So I want to start with you, please. The way that your dad has been depicted as being an abuser in this trial, I know that it has upset you and you felt it's very unfair. Tell us why.
They have some technical difficulties on their end, but we get the gist of it when she starts talking.
Story, and unfortunately, we are the voices now, and the way the trial has gone and the way things have taken place have nobody has ever contacted us to hear our story or asked us.
I don't know if she means news outlets or if she means the state attorney's office when she says that. But I find that very interesting and not great if she's talking about the state, but she might not.
Questions in regards to our father, his character, or the relationship between him and Sarah Boone. Me and my siblings actually spoke to our father that night, and we have a lot of experiences with Miss Boone that do not speak to what the media is stating she is, a victim or a gentle individual. I'm sure she's loved over there at jail due to the fact that Sarah Boone is very, very calculated.
So again, and there's some things where I don't know. I don't feel like the media portrayed her as this victim or anything positive about her. That's not the way I saw her portrayed in the media necessarily. And I'm sure she's loved over at the jail. That's not necessarily what I thought was being portrayed or reported about her. People are asking if it's his daughter or sister. Daughter is what they're reporting. I don't know her, but that's what she said. She was introduced as his oldest daughter. So, when you're the victim's family, this is also a good kind of understanding process for us and learning process for us that it's very hard, right? And your perception can be very skewed or different where you're watching it and you're like, why aren't they hammering her? Why are they even letting her say she's a victim of battered spouse? This is so unfair. And a lot of times that's how the victims' families feel. And it's really sad. And it's hard to explain to them this is part of the process. These are her rights. She's allowed to put forth this defense. She's allowed to attack your dad, basically, with the battered spouse syndrome defense because she has an overt act, a scintilla of evidence of it, and some prior domestic violence issues and intimate partner violence. And so that's how they're able to put that defense on. But I don't necessarily think the media was necessarily promoting her as a victim, but that's how it came across to George Torres' family.
She
said something that's important that she'll bring up again later. She said, we spoke to him that night. I don't remember anybody ever saying that or that evidence coming out. They had the call logs, they had the records. I believe it was just his brother, and then he tried to call one of his kids, but I don't think he talked to all of his kids. I'm not sure. I was a little confused about some of those details of what she was talking about, and we'll hear more about it in the family. Yes, this is the interview that took place before the verdict. That's what I said off the top.
By no means is a kind and sweet, soft.
All right, so it's helpful again. So people are saying this, people are saying that. So if you listen from the beginning of the video, I'll introduce the videos and the clips that we're watching and explain the context, and then we'll go through. So this was before the verdict. I didn't want to listen to it before the verdict because I thought maybe it would come out in rebuttal evidence. It didn't. So we're listening to it after with hindsight coming in and maybe talking about why or why not it didn't come in at rebuttal, because that's what a lot of questions people had for me. Okay.
Woman. She is very calculated, very devious, very conniving. My father was sheltered and berated. He was kept from us. He was the real victim in this situation. Unfortunately, again, as stated, he is not here to tell his story, but we are here to give his side the best we can from the view that we were able to see things.
Sure. Anna Victoria, in one of the videos that we've all seen, Sarah Boone told police that George's family didn't like her and that they referred to her as the blue-eyed white dragon. Would you talk about where that nickname came from, and if it's true that you all didn't like her, and in particular, why?
I can definitely answer that. As far as the nickname is concerned, that was created all through Sarah's little brain. Other than that, she was definitely correct as far as us not liking her, and she should have stated that she didn't like us either, because that is very much correct as well. She, like I stated, is very evil, and what she is acting out there on the stand and within that courtroom is baffling to me, because that is not the real Sarah Boone at all. But yeah, she was correct. We don't like her. We didn't like.
Some not so subtle shots. Her small brain. We don't like her. She doesn't like us. Again, that's not a surprise, right? A lot of relationships that happens, unfortunately. That's not ultimately what led to the end result in this case, the conviction of Sarah Boone. But again, just confirming that that's correct, but that it goes both ways. It's mutual.
Like her, that will never change. Unfortunately, I do feel bad for her and I wish her the best. But what I do wish is that my father receives his justice and she gets the time that she deserves. And a slap on the wrist is not it. Other than that, as far as a relationship with Sarah, one that was a good one, there wasn't one. We tried, we definitely tried, but she did not.
Anna Victoria, thank you for sharing all of that. I want to go to your mom now. Dolores, you were married to George for 14 years. I have three beautiful children with him. Two of them are here with us today, Destiny and Anna Victoria. We understand that at one point, Sarah Boone tried to fight you. Tell us about that.
Not per se fight me, because I want to say that we've had one engagement, which was for my children's birthday party that they attended later in the evening.
I feel like George Torres' ex here tries to clarify a bunch of things, not have hyperbole, just kind of be honest. She's like, I don't know if I'd say try to fight me, but we had one interaction here, and you'll hear it explained.
So I really have never had like a confrontation. It was made verbal over the phone. She had threatened me a couple times to come over and that she would dust her doormat for myself and my daughters.
She would dust her doormat for her and her daughters. I mean, and then we saw some text messages where she mentioned some of his family members and stuff. It's just like, it's gross to think about, how Sarah Boone treated the rest of the family. Again, this type of stuff, not necessarily admissible or relevant in proving the crimes, but some stuff is coming.
But it was basically verbal threats that she would give every time that George would call his children, any chance that he had, that he was able to call his children to speak, and I was present. It was a problem for George. She was very much jealous of me, for what reason I'm not aware of, but we never had physical altercations.
Well, and that's a very good thing. Tell us, Dolores, during your marriage to George, was he ever violent with you or any of your kids?
So now is when we get to some of the information that people were asking, why didn't this come out in rebuttal? And she's going to discuss she and George's past relationship. We're going to hear her answers. It's going to take a couple minutes here, and then we're going to talk about why or why not they may have come in.
He was never violent with my children. We would have normal husband and wife family spats here and there, but never to the point where police were ever involved, DHS was ever involved. We were never that type of family.
So when asked if she was violent with she or the kids, she said never violent with the kids. So if I'm a defense attorney, maybe potentially that sounds like, well, then it sounds like he was violent with you. But the interviewer follows up with another question for some clarification.
I can't relate to Sarah and the abuse that she so-called claims that she's received from George, because I never received abuse like that. I want to say the only thing that I can say about George is that he was a ladies' man.
Gotcha.
I think you know what that means, right? She insinuates that maybe he wasn't faithful to her. That's why they didn't end up together. They were together for a long time and had multiple children together. And it seems like their relationship was still okay, I guess, based on this interview, and his relationship with his kids was still good. But calmed down a little bit on the abuse, because it maybe could have sounded like he was violent with her. Then she softens it a little bit. And I think another follow-up question is coming about that.
Gotcha. Okay. And so just to be very clear here, did anything physical ever take place in terms of physical violence that he inflicted on you?
No.
Okay. And thank you.
If there was any follow-up questions, that would be your answer. No. So, question. People were asking, why couldn't this have come out on rebuttal that in his prior relationships with his prior wife, he was never physically violent with her? And therefore, that would prove that would rebut some of the George is violent, George is an abuser. We heard in Ashley Benefield's case that that Doug Benefield was potentially violent or had these issues with his prior wife who had passed away. So some of that information was able to come in. So people were asking, why couldn't this lady come and testify on behalf of George Torres that, he wasn't violent in the past? And there may be some circumstances where you could potentially get something like that in. But if Sarah Boone doesn't know that he wasn't violent with his prior wife, or if she thought maybe he was violent with his prior wife for X, Y, or Z reason. She heard from somebody, George told her, she inferred from some reason that that's why they broke up. I have no idea. I'm just kind of making those things up. But the point is, what Sarah Boone knew at the time she committed the act is what's important for her mental state in the battered spouse defense. So sometimes the truth or reality might not come in because it might not be relevant, because if she didn't know that he was, a perfect angel before or never violent before or whatever the explanation is, then it may not be relevant, may not be allowed to come in, even though it feels like and sounds like it could have been very important and good evidence for the state attorney in this case, right? Because it does feel like that would have been important. It's like, yeah, right, she's making all this up. Look at his prior wife he was with for years and years, never physically violent with her. Well, that might not be relevant. That might not be why, or that might be why the state wasn't allowed to bring it in. So those are just some of kind of the legal arguments on both sides, because when it is self-defense, when it is battered spouse, the violence of the victim the violent character of the victim can become relevant and part of the case. Those responses potentially would allow to be part of the case, but not everything anybody's ever done in their life, because then it would be, 10 of Sarah Boone's friends coming and saying she's not violent, she's the nicest person in the world, 10 of George's friends coming and saying that as well. So they try to keep it relevant to what's in their relationship. I think there are probably some arguments that could have been made to get her to testify, but I didn't hear any of those happen in front of the judge. So maybe that's the legal analysis the state went through before making that decision. Manley said, does it say something about Owens, or does it say something about the other lawyers that Owens was able to make the case to trial while all the other lawyers ran for cover? So there's multiple ways to look at this, Manley. Number one, I would guess some of the other lawyers would say, yeah, well, he went and he lost in an hour. He didn't do a very good job. We would have done a better job. We could have done a better deal, whatever it may be. It's always in hindsight. Oh, wow, the prosecutors did everything perfect because they got a verdict in an hour and a half, and the defense attorneys did everything horrible because they lost in an hour and a half, whatever it may be. I think you're kind of trying to give maybe props to Owens in this. I think they did a really valiant job putting together a reasonable defense and a good fight in a very short period of time, much, much shorter than 99% of the defense attorneys that go to trial in criminal trials in this country. Okay. It was still a losing battle. And I think the facts were against them. It was always going to be an uphill battle. I didn't agree with everything they did, didn't agree with every move they made, but I thought they did their best. I do think they did their best. I don't think that if you gave them a redo in 45 days, they could have done much better. And I don't know that, any of the prior lawyers who had been on the case for months and months would have done any better of a job. I don't know that. Right. But just judging off Owens, I think he did the best he could, got other lawyers on board, and they handled the case from beginning to end. And I bet the jury didn't know. They would have never guessed or called them unprepared. Maybe they would have. I don't know. I'm really interested to see if we're going to get any juror interviews in this case. Crid said, is Sarah on suicide watch post-verdict? I have not heard. It's a normal thing, but she hasn't been sentenced yet. I don't know that answer. I haven't heard, but I wouldn't be surprised. P, why did these family members not testify for the state? It sounds to me like the state didn't call them or didn't reach out to them enough. Maybe the state knew that what they had to say was not going to be relevant, but I think they're going to talk more about the phone calls that night and how they knew George was concerned based on the phone calls, but the state never called them about that either, which I felt like would have been reasonable, that George was kind of concerned that night because maybe Sarah was acting a little violent or crazy or whatever it may be, but they didn't call him, which I found interesting. John, dust her doormat. What does that mean? I assume it means like, where I live. I'll even clean off the doormat for you to come see me so we can, handle this. I don't know.
for that. I know these are very personal questions, but we really want to get everything out here and get your side of all this, as everyone in the courtroom isn't hearing it. Destiny, we're so happy to have you here. You were a surprise this morning. We knew Anna Victoria was coming on and your mom, and we're so glad to see you too. What would you like to say about your dad, the kind of person that he was? What would you like the world to know about him?
My dad was an amazing person. He was my best friend. Nobody's perfect, but my dad was very loving. Everybody loved him back. He didn't deserve what happened to him. I don't think anybody deserves to die like that. I was 15 when it happened. I ended up being very depressed and going through suicidal thoughts and things of that nature. Yeah, we're just really trying to get my dad justice.
I mean, that's brutally sad from this young lady. And obviously that didn't come out because that's not necessarily relevant to the facts of what happened in this case, but what that is perfectly relevant for, and what I expect, when I expect to hear that, is during sentencing. And these are going to be the kinds of things that are going to make this decision for Judge Kranick really important and really difficult. Because when you hear stuff like this, it's going to be gripping. It is going to be gripping, just as you and I felt watching this together today.
We know you are. We know you are. And Anna Victoria, back to you really quickly. You said that no one has reached out to you. Has the prosecutor's office reached out to your family?
As far as my father's mother, his father, his siblings are concerned, they have been communicated with due to the fact that they do live in Orlando. I live in Philadelphia, but nonetheless, I have communicated with the attorneys. The only thing I would say is I've never been contacted in regards to who my father was. I'm not sure if Sarah Boone deleted the calls or anything like that, but I'm sure those things were able to be, brought back up. But my siblings and I spoke to our father that night, and I do think that our encounter and what took place over the phone is very valuable to the case, as well as.
So again, she's talking about evidence that didn't come out that I remember, conversations she had with George that night over the phone. She thinks maybe Sarah deleted the calls. I feel like the experts would have been able to find that. We've seen that in a lot of cases. I've had experts find deleted calls and things like that. So this was interesting. This was something I just don't know why it didn't happen. Maybe the state felt like they didn't have enough to prove that this actually happened, or that if they did put on this evidence, and the defense would have been able to poke holes on the deleted calls, or, cast doubt on the state's case because of this, and the state felt they had a strong enough case without it. Maybe that was a strategic trial decision the state made, but interesting nonetheless that this was some evidence that potentially could have been useful that was not used.
What their relationship was like and what Ms. Boone's plans may have been that night. Again, whether they have been premeditated or not, in my opinion, they very much were, due to the character of Sarah and all the experiences that we've had with her. But
what did your dad say on the phone?
If we were contacted, things could have been much better.
So she clearly thinks that the state should have called them. And again, this is before the verdict. They're probably very happy with the guilty verdict on the second-degree charge. But this is before the verdict. It seems like maybe they were getting a little nervous or felt like the state or the case could have been stronger with their help, and they were not asked for their help. So that's kind of just, I find it more interesting to listen to this in hindsight than before the verdict.
So nothing in specific, but we talked on the phone for months at a time, every so often. I would say that I spoke to my father at least 3 times a week, maybe more. And we would stay on the phone as long as he possibly could stay on the phone with me, without Sarah getting agitated or whatever the case may be.
Sure.
I can't really put into words the way she would act.
Yeah. You all got to know a different Sarah Boone.
Just talk all the
for
time,
sure.
and my other that day seemed very uneasy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, we are so sorry for your loss, and would love to continue the conversation with you as we're getting close to the jury getting the case. Anna Victoria, Dolores.
All right. So that was the victim's comments, the family's comments before the verdict. Kim said, have you seen her read the letters she wrote from her divorce? She used the same letter writing tactics then that she did in the case. So gross. That doesn't surprise me. And I have not seen them, but I think I can imagine what they were like. Reese's mom said, I think Sarah Boone changed her tune regarding the lawyers after having to go pro se. I think it was probably a combination, right? I think number one, it definitely felt like Owens' attitude may have been a little different than some of the other attorneys, and he was all in and wanted to do this and was, on the same, more of the same page with Sarah Boone, not the same exact page as we heard kind of throughout the trial, her having to approve some changes or different things that he did. But I definitely think you're right. I think the fact that she's like, I shouldn't screw this up because I don't have anywhere else to go. I don't have any other lawyers. I don't have any other court appointed counsel. And until her right was constructively waived and the judge found that, she was always thinking the grass is probably greener. The next lawyer will be better. I just need a different lawyer that might continue believing in my case. I'm sure it came out in trial that Sarah got him to call his kids that night. I thought the only conversation that actually came out was with his brother, and that she was telling him to call his kids to agitate him, to make him mad, because that's something that made him mad. I don't remember it actually coming out that he did call his kids or what those conversations were, but it was a little fuzzy because it kind of came out third hand through some of the experts, I thought. Samantha said, I thought George had a domestic past. His brother was in jail for potentially doing something to his wife. Yeah, I know that's what Owen said. I don't know. And that could be another reason why the state didn't use this evidence, because maybe there were some things in his past that could have become relevant if they would have brought this evidence out. There's always a strategic game being played on the background and what we're going to enter and what we're not going to enter as lawyers. And obviously the state made the right call in entering what they did because he got the verdict that they sought. Carrie, hi, Peter. Thanks for all you do. Do you think Owens did a CYA letter when Sarah turned down the plea? And how much weight would that have if she claims ineffective assistance of counsel? So declining the plea deal is not going to have any weight. There's colloquies multiple times, specifically the judge asking Sarah on the record, anybody, promise you anything, do anything to force you to reject this. I don't think Owens could have been more clear on the record that he thought it was a good offer, good deal. He did think the state should have negotiated a little bit more. We're going to hear more now about what he thinks about that plea deal, but that's not going to have anything to do with the ineffective assistance of counsel. And I'll just tell you, unless something happened that I don't know about on the background and they didn't do something or chose not to do something or screwed something up, there ain't no way this is anywhere near the bar of ineffective assistance of counsel. Now, the lawyers themselves may say, we did not have enough time to effectively represent her and prepare her case because of the 45 days. So that could be a form of ineffective assistance of counsel, but it's more because of the judge's rulings and the lack of continuances and taking away her right to an attorney. And that is what I expect the focus of the appeal to be on. All right, let's hear what James Owens says now after the verdict, specifically about their conversations around the plea deal, which I have to take a deep breath sometimes when he talks, because I'm like, just don't reveal anything you guys said to each other.
Or know just how much her own testimony sank her, if at all. But since she was convicted of second-degree murder in the suitcase death of her boyfriend, we do know that she should have taken door number one. 3 weeks ago, prosecutors offered her 15 years in prison in exchange for a guilty plea. And if you do the math, she's been locked up for 4.5 years. So that means a little over 10 years is left with some shaved off good time, She'd be out for a decade. But Boone said no to the deal, and now she's facing a minimum of 22.5 years and a maximum of life. So why didn't she take the deal? Was she that convinced that she'd go free? I'm joined now by Sarah Boone's attorney, James Owens. Mr. Owens, it's great to have you back on the show. Thanks so much for being with me. What was your client's reaction when she heard the verdict, guilty, read in court?
Yeah, it was this past Friday evening, and I would say shock. We were not, she nor I were anticipating guilty as charged. we can.
She nor I, which to me says, and again, this is not something that he's revealing attorney-client privilege. I'm just reading between the lines. Usually your clients will ask you, if you had to guess what happened, and you always start with no guarantees because there's no guarantees in life, definitely not in jury trials. But he probably said something like, and I'm basing this off more context and information we're going to get in this interview, something like, I could see them coming down with a manslaughter verdict or culpable negligence where you still get convicted of something. If I was them, I wouldn't go guilty on second degree. And that's kind of what I said too, right? I wouldn't have gone guilty on second degree, but I can absolutely see how they got there. And if I was going to bet, when we were talking about what we thought the verdict was going to be, I thought the verdict was going to be second degree. I thought she was going to be guilty as charged, even though that might not be how I would have voted. I said I probably could be convinced by the rest of the jury that it gets there, especially because of the videos and her tone and what she said and how she acted. Doesn't get much more evil than that. So I get it. But he seems like he was also shocked that she was guilty as charged with that second degree. So I would guess they had some conversations about what he expected and his shock afterwards.
Considered that the jury might convict her of a lesser charge, or of the first lesser was manslaughter and the second lesser was culpable negligence. So yeah, she was in shock that they found her guilty as charged, which was the second degree murder.
So he even said, we thought it was possible one of the lesser includeds, but not second degree. And if you think you're going to get one of the lesser includeds and they offered you the lesser included before trial and your lawyer thought there's probably a good chance that's where we end up, it's a tough thing to look back on as a lawyer. And I feel his pain because I think he feels that pain too. He went out, he did his best job, but he kind of always knew she probably should have taken the deal.
I'm struggling to figure that one out because I had made a bet that the jury would come back under 2 hours, and they did. I found her wholly dislikable all through the entire process, from the moment she was arrested to the moment she was convicted.
I see a bunch of you saying you don't think Owens is shocked at all, and this is just a show. That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how you can be shocked, honestly. I don't know how you can be shocked because it's something that was always a real possibility.
I can't imagine I'm alone. Everyone I've spoken to who's been following the case, albeit not in the courtroom, has said the same thing. They'll throw the book at her. Why did your client and why did you feel that wasn't going to happen?
Well, she actually did pretty good on the stand if you watch her testimony.
So he thinks she did pretty good on the stand. What do you guys think? And I think it's an interesting thought. I don't even know if we kind of overall talked about that. I know she was cool, calm, collected, things like that. But what do you guys think? Because I don't think this interviewer agrees.
As far as Sarah goes, she actually did pretty good, I felt like. But, ultimately, as you mentioned earlier, the decision as to whether or not to accept a plea offer or to take the case to trial is ultimately only the client's decision. Lawyer can tell her the pros and cons and the strengths and weaknesses of her position versus the state's position.
Sure. Did you recommend to her to take the deal and she went against your recommendation? Because knowing how she's been with the last, 8 trial attorneys who, she spent before you, I would imagine that would be a scenario I'd believe.
Well, we talked about it in depth, and
he said he gave a little give there, a little tell, I should say. It's up to the client whether you go to trial or whether you take a deal, which to me says without saying that he maybe advised her to take the deal. She said no, and it's her case, her right, her life.
Attorneys who, she spent before you, I would imagine that would be a scenario I'd believe.
Well, we talked about it in depth, and I try not to give my opinion initially. I want them to try to make the decision on their own, and then if they ask me for my opinion, then I give it to them based on Yes. You know, and
What'd you say?
well,
He's like, I try not to give my opinion unless they ask. And she's like, well, did she ask? He's like, yes. Well, if we already know his opinion that he didn't think she was going to get convicted of second degree, but maybe manslaughter or culpable negligence, and he kind of thought she should take the plea deal and she didn't, then we know exactly how the whole conversation went. Here's the plea deal. What do you think, lawyer? Well, Sarah, this is what I think. And then she still said no, went against his advice. Now, I think they maybe thought that because the state kept offering this, that at some point they would offer something better, like 14 years, 13 years, 12 years, whatever it may be. And she can get out reasonably quickly with the 4+ years she had already served and the percent off for good time served. And she's out, 4, 5, 6 years instead of 8 years or whatever it would have been at 15. So I think they did think maybe that would keep going. I think they probably made those types of counter offers. If I had to guess, they counter offered that she would take a manslaughter plea deal, but something less than 15 years, maybe 10 years, something like that. But interesting to hear. We know a lot about how this conversation went down now between Sarah Boone and her lawyer.
that was something that I suggested she strongly consider. They asked me for my opinion, then I give it to them based on
Did
my.
she?
Yes. You know, and
What'd you say?
well, that was something that I suggested she strongly consider, was that plea. I think with 15 years, you do 80% of that sentence here in Florida, plus she'd done already 4.5 years. So she would have had, I think, about 8 years to do. So yeah, that was
she
a
went
real
against your
incentive.
advice. I mean, I sit here with a smile only because it's like I've heard this story so many times before, and I think you knew as well coming in as number 9 that she wouldn't take your advice. Have you had a chance to talk with her since the conviction, and is she rethinking her decision to ignore everybody who's smarter at this game than she is?
No, we haven't talked about.
I mean, did you hear that question? I'm going to back it up. Listen to that question.
You as well sit here with a smile only because it's like I've heard this story so many times before, and I think you knew as well coming in as number 9 that she wouldn't take your advice. Have you had a chance to talk with her?
I think you knew as number 9 that she wouldn't come in and take your advice. Those are shots fired at this lawyer. She had no problem taking shots at this lawyer. People are asking, can you have Owens come on your channel? One person says, the next person says, you would never waste your time with a person like this, would you? First off, I do not dislike or hate defense lawyers because they represent people convicted of crimes or people accused of crimes. Let's start with that. I have no ill will or hatred towards James Owens or any other criminal defense attorney. Would I have him on here and talk to him? I don't do a lot of that. Once in a while I do, especially if I know the person. Mark Eiglarsh came on. He reached out to me and was just kind of awesome to talk to and went back and forth. That's how he ended up on. Michael Ufferman, I've known forever. He literally coached and judged my moot court team back when I was in law school. So if I have a relationship with somebody, it's more likely that, they would come on. I don't have any ill will towards Owens. I would never say never, but I don't reach out to these people for interviews. Number 1. Number 2, I feel like we've heard everything he has to say. If there was more to talk about or something different or some other angle, I also would never want to ask a question where he's going to tell me something attorney-client privilege. I don't want to be the reason somebody missteps or has some kind of issue with their career or their case or clients. More importantly, the client's attorney-client privilege. The privilege is the client's. So, I mean, if I don't ever have him on, it's not because I hate him. It's not because I don't like him. I don't know him at all. I think he did about as good as he could do in 45 days. So just wanted to say that. All right, let's keep listening.
Her since the conviction, and is she rethinking her decision to ignore everybody who's smarter at this game than she is?
No, we haven't talked about that. She's got a sentencing coming up.
By the way, she said she ignores everybody that's smarter at this game than she is. I mean, the hatred runs deep.
December the 2nd, Monday, December the 2nd at 1:30. So we're going to deal with preparing her for that. She's going to speak at that. And then there's a pre-sentence investigation that the judge ordered. So we'll work on that. And the judge
What do you think she's going to get? What do you think the judge will sentence her to?
Well, there's a range, and I think the state attorney had said the low end was 22 years, and of course, life is the top of the range, and the judge is going to have to make a decision. As you know, there was testimony that she suffered from the battered spouse syndrome by our expert and also the state attorney's expert testify.
And that can be important at sentencing, that she did suffer from that, the mental health issues, the abuse in the past. That could all be mitigating factors in the sentence. Ryan said, plus he's obnoxious a little bit. I don't know if I would say he's obnoxious, but obnoxious people don't really bother me that much. I deal with all kinds of people all the time. How could he say anything else? He really can't. He can't really say, yeah, I thought she might get a guilty verdict. Kind of felt like he did say she might be guilty of one of the lesser includeds. I kind of did feel like he said that, Reese's mom, which again, maybe surprising to me. I don't really know. Kooky and a lot of people are saying, can you have Judge K on as a guest? He is my judge crush. He is amazing. I would love to have him on. So he's somebody I would easily ask to have on. I don't want to put him in a bad spot though. And I know he's a judge. If the conversation comes up and the opportunity presents itself, then potentially I would ask him to come on again. He can't talk about a case he's actively overseeing. I would not ask about anything like that, but just maybe ask what his mindset is as a judge, how he works as a judge, how he makes difficult decisions. That would be a cool conversation that maybe we'll see. A lot of judges probably wouldn't want to come on and do something like this. Putting themselves out there, making public comments is not the norm for a lot of judges. So I wouldn't blame him at all if he didn't want to, but that's more likely, I would say, than the other. If, and it's a big if, she gets the minimum, going to trial was only 3.5 year gamble, 22.5 minimum, minus 4 years, 18.5 years, maybe how she saw it. I think it ends up being a little bit more than that, but I agree with you. I mean, if she ends up getting the minimum, maybe it was worth the risk to her, but not knowing is quite a risk, right? Going from 15 years to potentially life is quite a risk.
Both of them agree. As you know, there was testimony that she suffered from the battered spouse syndrome by our expert, and also the state attorney's expert testified. Both of them agreed that she suffered. So there is some mitigating factors, although the jury did not find that she was justified.
All right, so hold on. As he's still talking about the mitigating factors, Kelsey, will you throw a poll up that says, will Sarah get 22.5 years, life, or somewhere in between as the three options? Will Sarah Boone's sentence be 22.5 years, life, or something in between? And I am 50-50 on whether or not I'm going to the sentencing. It's a maybe if you guys want me to, and think there will be some value gained. I'm not sure if there would. Maybe I'll go to that sentencing. And then we're also talking about going to the Adelson trial in Tallahassee to make up for the fact that I wasn't able to get over this trial because it went like that. They sped through it, stayed late, and made it happen quickly, as I was going to come Monday, and it finished late Friday night. So throw that poll up, and we'll finish watching the rest of the video now.
There's some mitigating factors, although the jury did not find that she was justified in the use of force that she used as a result of the battered spouse syndrome. I think the judge can consider the fact that ultimately, it was a dysfunctional, toxic relationship in which both of them probably abused each other.
Well, thanks for watching. Go to join.
So yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with that last part, that it was a toxic, abusive relationship mutually with each other, but that the jury definitely did not find that she was justified in the force that she used based on 2 fingers or a hand coming out of a suitcase and then taking a bat to somebody and leaving him in there overnight to die. Could they still do the deal with her if she waives all appeal rights, saves a ton of time and money? Absolutely, Ezekiel. Absolutely. The state could still offer something like that. And that's still something that could happen. Or they could make some kind of deal where she waives her appeal if the state requests the minimum of 22.5 years. There's all sorts of deals that could still be made. And we'll see. What would you have told her regarding taking the plea deal? I would have told her, I don't know all the facts, right? So this is different than if it was an actual case of mine. But based on what I know, based on what we've seen, I would have probably said something like, I think there's a good chance you get convicted on at least manslaughter. So if that's going to feel like a win at trial, why not just take it now? I think, maybe there's a less than 5% chance we win on culpable negligence and a less than 1% chance we get just an outright not guilty verdict. Okay. But then again, I probably would have gone with a more of a negligence defense than a battered spouse defense. So it would have maybe given us a better chance at culpable negligence, or manslaughter, but it's neither here nor there. But the risk of life, when you are admitting to committing the acts, it's one thing to say, I wasn't there, I didn't do it, it was somebody else, Brian Koberger, right? It seems to me like he's saying this was somebody else. I wasn't there, I didn't do this. It's a lot different of a plea negotiation than I did do this, but I think I was justified. And now the question is going to be, were you justified under the reasonable person standard in your certain circumstances and situation? That's a much different question than I wasn't there at all. I didn't do any of this. My actions had nothing to do with his death. Right. So those conversations would have been very differently, but that's how I would have put it. But at the end of the day, if she said no, I would have done the same thing that Owens did and go try the case. You go try the case, you present the battered spouse or the negligence, whatever it was, you present that case and the jury makes the decision. And that's it. I hear people saying Brian Coburn did it. I don't know whether he did it or not. I'm just saying it seems like that's what his defense is, that I was not there. I didn't do this. Okay. So what do you think, Sarah, or what do you think the sentencing will be? 22 and a half years got 16%. Life got 21%. So more people think life than the minimum of 22 and a half years. 63% say somewhere in between. As we sit here right now, I would probably vote for somewhere in between. But I do want to kind of see the pre-sentence investigation and the sentencing hearing to see how it all comes out when we hear about George, when we hear about Sarah, things like that. I do think that could move the needle up or down. I see people saying Runkle's in the chat. What's up, Runkle? I haven't seen it come across. What would it take for you to consider being a judge? I really just, like, especially if I wasn't able to do this as much or how I want to, right? Because like having your own firm and being your own boss and having, no red tape and kind of you stand behind your thoughts and beliefs and character and decisions and what you say is freeing, right? Not to mention like calendar and doing things that you want, being able to represent people. You also make more money as a private lawyer than you do as a judge. So always a consideration. I also think, while I work probably more hours than most judges do, it's on a different schedule and at a kind of different pace. And when I want to, and it's more project based, you're working on this case, you got to handle this trial, you got to handle this deposition, as opposed to you're sitting in court from, 9 to 5 or whatever while trial's going. It's just a very different vibe. It's a very different pace. It's a very different job than being a lawyer. I don't really have a lot of interest in it. And I love this interaction. And I think some people may feel like this is what it is for a judge, but I don't think it is. I can't see her expression of remorse being, I'm sorry, he made me do this. Well, I don't know, because she definitely said, I miss him. I still miss him to this day. I loved him. We were soulmates. We had a connection not even me and my ex-husband had. So stuff like that, I feel like she will be remorseful. I feel like she will still say she never intended for this to happen, because even with the battered spouse, they still kind of argued that there was no intent to end his life. So I think she will say that. I think she'll probably say she's sorry, that she feels guilty, even though she does still believe in her defense. She feels horrible about it. She wished it didn't happen. If she could go back and take it back, she would. I don't foresee her not saying anything like that. I think she will speak. I would advise her probably, if she wanted to, then to speak, because she's already testified. There's already so many statements. Can't really hurt the case. You can maintain your innocence for appeal, but still, apologize and do your best at the sentencing hearing. Hey, Peter, where can I find your address to send you some black licorice? Please don't. That's like somebody sending something radioactive to me. It is so gross. Yeah. Some people are laughing about last night's members only live, where we may or may not have eaten some of those disgusting jelly beans. And I was actually surprised at how disgusting they were. Somebody said, Peter, I could definitely see you teaching before becoming a judge. I agree with that, especially because you can do that with other stuff. But I like this, right? Like, I like these conversations. I love the endorphin hit of this, having these conversations, learning from you guys, teaching, showing things, explaining with illustrations and examples that are happening in literally real life, agreeing and disagreeing and, growing together and breaking some things down to build it up. So I really like this. I think this gives me the endorphin hit like teaching probably never could. And it still allows me to do all the lawyering that I like. All right. That's all we got for this one, folks. Thank you guys for showing up and showing out. Hit that like button if you have not already. Let's get it to 10,000 likes. I think like every single Sarah Boone video I've done over the last couple months has gotten to 10,000 likes. Let's get this one there too. Make sure you subscribe if you have not already. Until next time, I'm out of here. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. And don't forget to check out the Lawyer You Know podcast with new seasons dropping every quarter. If you have a case you want to talk to us about, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, or slip and fall case, please email us at lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. And of course, all these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, The Lawyer You Know.